Bali, prawda? Byłeś w Bali, czy nie? W Indiach? Indianów, tak? A gdzie jest Hejdyński? Nie ma go dzisiaj. Hejdyński.
Jest prezesem.
Ja to też zaczynam uczuwać troszeczkę, bo jestem trochę starszy od moich kolegów. Jestem.
Ja jak byłam bardzo małą, byłam
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui parle français ici? Oui, on parle français un petit peu. Est-ce qu'on va chanter en français? Gens du pays, c'est à ton tour de vous laisser parler d'amour. Gens du pays, c'est à ton tour de vous laisser chanter d'amour. This is just so you can see how good the next singer will be later today when you see how bad this singer can be. To co, Marek, czy jest jeszcze tam ktoś, kto się zwleka? Zaczynamy, prawda? Pani Mario, zapraszamy do siedzeń. Panie Antku, twoja rodzina jest najgorsza. Grzesząca. Obok mnie. Jeszcze sobie położymy gdzieś program. To mi pożyczy program. Will you lend me the little program? I'm just so I know where we are. Dziękuję bardzo. No dobrze. Nadal sobota. No w Australii już jest jutro przecież. A to jeszcze dzisiaj.
It's already tomorrow in Australia.
No już w Australii wczoraj. Już było. To jest bardzo przestarzały program. Proszę wybaczyć. To nie jest aktualne. This was a test, was it? Okay. I failed the test. I failed very badly. This is more like it. Okay, ja po angielsku wprowadzę. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start today. Today we started with Mr. Tomasz Koba-Kozłowski telling us about the Kresy, which is where was the cradle from which our families all came and in which this history started before the war. And then we had the film by pani Jolanta, przepraszam, bo ja w moim wieku już nie mogę tyle rzeczy na raz, prawda, robić. Proszę wybaczyć. So we started with the cradle in the Kresy, and then we had Jonathan's film about the exile experience through Africa, etc., and going forward. So we're continuing along the theme of history today with Anders' army, and we are also continuing the theme of the cultural works, which Mr. Tomasz Koba-Kozłowski started us with today about the works of Lwów. And there is no better person to bring these two stories together, the story of the military and exile and the story of the art, than our next speaker, who is Professor Jan Wiktor Sienkiewicz. Now, I will not take any more of his time by introducing his biography, other than to tell you his biography is here in the speakers. And we are very honored to have him here today from Toruń, from Mikołaj Kopernik University. And well, I will leave to you, Professor Sienkiewicz, to talk a little bit more about your work and also about, I believe that there may be something for the delegates, but I will also leave that, I think, to you to explain. So I would like you to please now just welcome Professor Jan Wiktor Sienkiewicz to talk about Anders' Army art. Dziękuję bardzo. Oh, I forgot to mention he is 4 months younger than me.
Rocznik 60, jesteśmy cały czas młodzi.
Tak.
Dzień dobry Państwu, dobrego popołudnia pewnie.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Sobie możemy życzyć.
I think we can wish each other a good afternoon. This is a very interesting program. And the only struggle we have left is the struggle.
Ja przede wszystkim chciałbym podziękować za zaproszenie.
I would like to first of all
jako wielki honor i wyróżnienie.
I'm very honored, and I feel very special to have been invited, and I really mean it, because we have fate has crossed our paths, mine and the president of the Kresy Siberia Foundation. I am not the first or second generation of Siberian deportees, but I am the third generation of immigrants. My great-grandfather emigrated to Chicago from Vilnius twice to help his family. So in my family is familiar with the idea of immigration and re-immigration for years. So today I will briefly present my presentation, present my material, but I will also make a reference to this very personal film that we have been able to see. It was his personal journey. And this will be my journey with the artists. In November 2013, one of the Polish newspapers presented a book published in London called Anders's Artists, and showing the author together with the last surviving artists from Anders' army, Ms. Janina Baranowska. I think that there are people among you who know Ms. Janina Baranowska, and in this small bubble we have a poem by Jeremy Przybora about journeys. So it says, I will take you with me to an unknown journey to far places. I have been directed by my sympathies in my choice of your company, and I don't think I will be disappointed. The journey of the Anders army, the journey that my work on the art of Anders' army took me was long and arduous, but there were no moments that I would regret. The work on the art of the soldiers from the Anders army is a fruit of the work, the research I have been doing since August 1989. This is my journey that is dedicated to Polish artists and Polish art overseas. There were also several articles and other books that I will mention later. And this is the essence of our future activities, that to undertake breaking through the academic which surrounded the arts of the artists, of the Anders army artists, was a patriotic duty to me. I was born in Przemyśl near Grodno, as a graduate and student, a graduate of the Catholic University in Lublin, because in those days, if you didn't want to study in a communist university, you would study at the Catholic University in Lublin, which carried on the traditions of the Vilnius University before the war. I've received many so-called good advice about my academic choices. But I was convinced of that my goals, my choices were right when I visited Marian Bohusz-Szyszko in his studio in England. Bohusz-Szyszko was a very talented painter, and at the same time, General Władysław Anders's closest friend and collaborator. After Monte Cassino, he played the most important role in the organization of the Polish Polish students in Italy, at the Fine Arts Academy in Rome. The red circles surround those who were still alive. The artists who were still alive but were not recognized even a couple of years ago. Those artists were transported to Sudbury to Polish resettlement corps camps. After my first meeting with Marian Bohusz-Szyszko at his painting studio in London, I realized that this was not a small-scale task that I was facing, but there was a sea, an entire ocean, not even dozens, but hundreds of artists, painters, graphics, and sculptors who were living in the UK and the United States and all over the world. Marian Bohusz-Szyszko continued opening new doors before me and pointing me to further and further tracks of Polish heritage outside of Poland. 5 years of work, meetings and discussions between 1989 and 1993 eventually ended in a PhD dissertation and my first publication on the life of the artist. Here we have Professor Mieczysław Paszkiewicz, art historian, who was my promoter for my dissertation. He was in London, he knew those artists. The Polish artistic community in London, which was still working very active in the 1990s, the core of which were the artists from the Anders Army, later became the target of my next work, Polish art galleries in London in late 1920. I don't show you these pictures for my own sake, but to make Poland aware that the remains of the Polish government in exile, which had passed its insignia to the Polish government in 1990, President Kaczorowski and his wife still supported my work and promoted my work. Just like you can see in the picture, I always had my book launches in London under the auspices of the Polish government in exile. Somebody told me that the Polish galleries is probably just folk art, but not high art. But my work eventually led to new monographs on the Polish arts. Here is the gallery of Mateusz Grabowski and the Wieliczka gallery, which were exhibition centers in London, and the book speaks about them. This is not Sofia Loren. This is Halina Nałęcz, Halina Nowochońska, Więckowska, who had gone along the Anders Trail, and after losing her husband in the Second World War, she decided to pick up the handsomest man after the war in the Polish club, and that's what she did. And it really paid her off, because the her husband's wealth helped her open an art gallery, and her husband really supported her activity because they could not have children. after this book, after the publication of this book, and I must say that we launched it in Wilno, because it's not a typo. Her name was Halina Maria, but she went by Halima Nałęcz. And here we launched the book, and 4 hours later, Halima passed away. We told her that books with the paintings had arrived in Wilno, and she said, well, great, I can go now. And that's what happened. She passed away after a few hours. And this was not the end of my work. I continued working with the Polish community and in London and other places. And my next book was the monogram on Marian Bohusz-Szyszko, and the last one of my most interesting monograms, Ryszard Demel, who is in his 90s, he's still alive, an artist from the Anders Army, who could not handle life in Hastings in 1946 with his Italian wife. He returned to Padova in Italy, and he still is alive, and he's still creating there. His 5 refracting stained glass windows in the Padova Cathedral. There in the chapel, under the main altar, you see these fractional altars designed by the Pole, and they also contain elements from the Polish culture, including Our Lady of Częstochowa, on the background of Monte Cassino and the red poppies. After those books, it was time for a synthesis. And such a synthesis is in my book published in 2012 called Art in the Waiting Room. And after that, I had to explain to the different communities and circles, is it really art in the waiting room, and will Polish artists here in the post-communist Poland have to give place to the emigration artists? But I think that this is the last the last moments to promote this art of those people outside of Poland. As it is with the expat communities, when we stop speaking about them, they stop existing. So we must continue speaking of them. I managed to visit Beirut in Lebanon. Those are pictures to show you the man next to me, the son of the greatest Lebanese sculptor of his time, and he himself today is the best-known Lebanese sculptor who admits that his artistic career and his father's was affected, impressed most significantly by Polish sculptors. A Polish sculptor who was in Lebanon in 1943-48 and then brought his father to Paris and introduced him to the artistic community there. And who knows the contribution of Polish artists not only in our culture but throughout the world. And it is the 4th or 5th time that I am showing pictures that I have dug out literally from archives and warehouses of the Alexandrian Museum, which was closed for years during the political upheaval. But because of various political efforts, I was able to photograph these works there, which are post-impressionist works, which in 1942, 43, and 44 were purchased by Polish artists were purchased from these artists who were migrating through Egypt and the Middle East and were placed in the collection of the Alexandrian Museum and never saw the light of day. And as you can see, their condition is perfect because they have never been exhibited. So I thought it was time to synthesize the work of the art of the Anders Army. The first one was published in 2013, the second edition in 2014, and the third one in the third edition was published in 2016, and all these editions are illustrated with material also unknown previously, which I had collected through various archives and private collections and places which had never been available and which never saw an inventory. And my book launch in 2016 was attended by Anna Maria Anders, and it was we are not here because we have not been blown here by political winds, but because of our search for our roots that have taken our families through Siberia, but also because after 1989 we were able to secure those materials in archives. In 2016, after 2016, we were able to publish the fourth edition. But first, I would like you to take a look at this photograph, which was taken in London after when General Anders's wife attended one of the Thursday dinners at Mrs. Żuławska's home, and she asked me, well, will you promise me something? And I said yes. Well, she says, well, if so, then I want to live to see a book on Anders's artists, and unfortunately she did not live long enough to see it. But while I was writing the book, I was lucky to always be visited by the general's wife, and she also visited my family. She always looked forward to the publication. And here, the lady who was in charge of the publication, and she, her first husband, Witold Borucki, was playing and somebody else was singing. I have been to Australia and I met Wiktor Borucki. We even had a car accident. I was able to meet him and talk to him. But the consequence of this research and meetings and lectures and classes, and I must say this, that for the last few years I have been
polskiej sztuki na migracji kieruje też jedynym, i to też trzeba dopowiedzieć, w świecie Zakładem Historii Sztuki i Kultury Polskiej na Migracji. Ostatecznie w ubiegłym roku Fundacja Edukacyjna Projektów Edukacyjnych zdobyła środki, wydając
Polish art outside of Poland.
W reżyserii młodego reżysera.
And so a young director whose name is Brill made a 20-minute documentary based on this literature and archival materials, which we will hopefully be able to view.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie profesorze. Jeszcze pan zostanie, prawda, będziemy mieli okazję pytania i takiej dyskusji za jaką pół godziny.
If you can stay, we will have a chance to...
Bo to będzie już na końcu raczej dnia, to będziemy mogli jeszcze troszeczkę. Pani Iwona, czy pani jest w stanie, ażeby podjąć scenę tutaj? Dziękuję bardzo. I'll switch back to English very quickly. Ivana Januszaitis, as I introduced at the very beginning of the day, has been a friend of Chris's Siberia for many years, and she has a deep personal connection, which I will not preempt by trying to explain, because her entire presentation is, of course, very deeply personal. But we just wanted to say that we're very honored to have you here today. And I should also just mention to you that at least one of the people here today, a Sibirak from the US, has said she has only come to the conference because we had the opera singer, and that's you. So thank you very much. And thank you, Joanna, for giving me that insight. So, Ivana, please.
And harrowing experiences of my grandparents and their families with you today. I am, in fact, the granddaughter of General Marian Żegota Januszaitis, and if time allows, I will say a few words about this remarkable Polish patriot who lived at Szyły, which was a settlement near Krzemieniec in Wołyń. I think, and I'm really passionate about this, I think it's terribly important for the English-speaking world to hear our stories. The English-speaking world to hear our stories. Witam Państwa i jest mi szalenie przyjemnie skorzystać z tej okazji, aby się podzielić.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here and have the opportunity to share the tales and harrowing experiences of my grandparents and the families with you today. I think it's terribly important for the English-speaking world to hear our stories. My grandfather, who was an incredible Polish patriot, I will tell a little bit about him. He had
Let me set the scene. And I thought I'd set the scene in a slightly different way. I was in the Polish Girl Guides in London for many years, and this is a song that we sang very often. And I never really thought about it till now. To jest krótka piosenka, której się nauczyłam, kiedy byłam harcerką, polską harcerką w Londynie i chciałam Państwu zaśpiewać, bo ja myślę, że to stworzy taką pewną atmosferę. Więc wyobraźmy sobie, tutaj jest ognisko. Here is the campfire. Right, and I'm in my Polish uniform. Płonie ognisko i szum jąknieje.
The fire is burning, the forest is whistling, and the camp manager is with us, and he talks about old tales of heroic times, about knightlyhood from the Kresy, about the defenders of our Polish borders. The wind is blowing above us, and the oak forest is humming.
A ponad nami wiatr szumny wieje i dębowy huczy las. And at the time, I never really thought, well, what are kresowe stanice? Well, now I know. So, there we go. Let me set the scene. Don't go away. Excuse me. Technical hitch. Thank you. Right, here we go. So let me set the scene. June 1940, my grandfather, on my mother's side, Antoni Bąkała, he was stationed in Kobryń. He later moved to Brasław, which is now in Belarus. And he was in the Polish army at the time, and he was arrested as soon as the Russians invaded. After the amnesty in 41, he joined the Polish army forming in Samarkand under General Anders. Now that same June, the Russian soldiers banged on the door of my grandmother's house and to her horror, demanded she and the children pack their bags in 20 minutes. Pack your bags in 20 minutes. Babcia froze on the spot, but my mum, as a 14-year-old, and my mum, ever practically minded, ran to the cellar and filled a sack with food and essentials. And together with her 2 brothers, the family had to travel in dark cattle trucks over 2 weeks or so, till finally arriving somewhere south of Arkhangelsk. They and hundreds of others were taken by large tractors to a prison camp deep in a forest near the town, and I think this is Kotlas. I'm still not sure of many of the places that I mention, and I'm hoping that over the next few years I will be able to fill in the gaps of my own knowledge. Babcia worked in the forest, my mum helped in the kindergarten, while the 2 younger boys went to school. And in fact, while she was working in the kindergarten, one of the few benefits of working in the kindergarten was that she was able to get some extra bread. Anyway, I've heard it said that one commandant of a similar gulag informed everyone, "There is no Poland and never will be." And he said, "You have been brought here to work until you die, and stop thinking that you will return to Poland. The 2 most powerful countries are USSR and Germany." Well, my mother remembers that on arrival to this hellhole, she had to spend the first night because she went in the June transport. She didn't make the February transport because my grandmother at the time had typhoid. So she was actually deported in the June when it was very, very warm. Anyway, she spent the first night with her brothers sleeping outside, since the very basic barracks were filthy dirty and they had cockroaches crawling everywhere. Food was incredibly scarce, incredibly scarce. The Poles frequently had to eat a ghastly, smelly fish soup with potatoes, and to this day my mother cannot stand food. Poza śledziami to po prostu mama nie je żadnej ryby, bo wciąż pamięta tą śmierdzącą
Eat
zupę.
fish because she still remembers the smelly soup.
Fortunately, they were able to pick the fruits of the forest and mushrooms, which they dried to keep them going during the harsh winter. And even now, my mum, at 92, she says, "No co, pojedziemy do lasu, będziemy zbierać grzybki w tym roku," and she can hardly
Go to the forest and pick up mushrooms.
The continuing shock and fear of the unknown, many of the Polish community survived. As we all know, in June 41, amnesty was declared. Groups of Poles, they just formed together by word of mouth, wherever they could, and as far as I know, they walked to the river Dwina, where they took barges to the nearest town, and that was a journey from hell in itself. By sheer coincidence, Babcia met a Polish soldier who happened to be in the same prison with her husband. And it was as a result of meeting this soldier, because supposedly all the train tickets had been sold, that he helped her to buy train tickets for apparently the last transport heading south to Uzbekistan, where the Polish army was based. And it was only a few years, well, more than a few years ago, about 10 years ago, that I suddenly realized thousands and thousands of Poles never made it to a train. Never made it to any form of transport to leave Russia. And when I was in London quite a few years ago, I used to help an organization called Friends of Poland. And they often took food and all sorts of things by truck to the Ukraine. And the lady who was behind this amazing, small, unknown charity organization used to tell me that there are thousands of the forgotten Poles. So I often think of those thousands of forgotten Poles. Anyway, when Babcia and my 2 uncles, wujek Zbyszek and wujek Jenek, and my mother Krystyna, were in Uzbekistan at the army camp, My mother and my grandmother used to pick cotton, and the boys, apparently they looked after camels, but at least they could earn a little bit of money and they had some food to eat. At some stage, again, this is part of the journey that I'm not completely au fait with. They traveled the river Amudarya. Mother always said we traveled the river Amudarya. And eventually, with hundreds of others, they took a train to the port of Krasnodvorsk with hundreds of other desperate refugees. They had to cross the Caspian Sea in a very old, worn-out ship, packed in like sardines. And they arrived, as you heard earlier on in the film, in Iran. They stayed for a while at the refugee camp run by the Polish army at Pachlevi, which then much later on took the refugees to Palestine. And when my mother, Babcia, and the boys arrived in Palestine, the two boys joined the Junacka Szkoła, that's the school for young cadets, and my mother joined the girls' school in Nazareth, Szkoła Młodszych Ochotniczek.
Young volunteers and the School of Young Volunteers.
Of 2002, I'll translate this in a minute. There was a very important world gathering. It was the first time that these ladies, who are the young volunteers, Młodsze Ochotniczki, met together. They came from Canada, from New Zealand, Argentina, all over the world, to Półtusk. Półtusk is just north of Warsaw. And in Półtusk, there's a beautiful castle. And about 100 people came to Półtusk, myself included. I was invited to come not only as one of the grandchildren, there were about 6 of us, but also because I was in charge of organizing the music for this 10-day event. And all I can say to you is that each of these ladies, who were 80 plus, they all were a walking history book. I felt so humble being amongst this gathering of these amazing women who survived. And if you ever go to Półtusk, they have a gallery there. There's lots of information about the young volunteers, the Młodsze Ochotniczki w Półtusku. Powinno się tam pojechać I to zwiedzić. Now I mentioned that my uncles went to the boys' school, Szkoła Junacka, in the town of Barbara, which was quite a few miles away, but they often came to visit the girls' school. And in fact, all family members and many people that I've met during my singing career, when I've been entertaining various Polish organizations, just about everybody always say that we had a great time in Palestine. They were very happy, and they often spoke of the great camaraderie that existed in those days, because they were all, as we say in English, in the same boat. 1947, the family left Palestine. They came by ship from Port Said in Egypt to Liverpool, where they were taken to Foxley, which was a Polish resettlement camp just outside the city of Hereford, that's Western England. And my mother, who sadly suffers from dementia, she is a lovely, gentle, compliant 92-year-old, a true survivor, and I am extremely proud of my heritage. Thank you. And now you're going to hear a song. How much time have I got? 2 minutes? About 3 minutes. I'll save that for another time, I think. I think I want to finish it there. I'll tell you more about my grandfather, Marian Żegota Januszaitis, who lived in Wołyń, and what he did. You can Google that, just look it up online. It'll speak for itself. And but one thing I will say about my father, Jerzy Januszaitis, again, you can find out about him in the War Museum in Warsaw. My father left Poland at the young age of 19 to carry a secret code which had to be delivered to General Sosnkowski in Paris. He'd never done, as far as I knew, mountain climbing, but he crossed the Carpathians with a friend of his. He was caught by the KGB twice, escaped. Long story, eventually ended up in Paris, joined the Polish 1st Armoured Division. After the French capitulation, ended up in Scotland, where he continued his military studies, but he was asked to go and do a photographic and film course at the famous Pinewood Studios. And what resulted in that was that he became the official photo reporter for the Polish 1st Armoured Division. And he has a very famous film called Idziemy, which, yes, he filmed the closing. He filmed everywhere, basically. He would stand on top of the tank during raging battles. He filmed the closing of the Falaise Pocket, the battles of Machuga, liberating Abbeville, Saint-Omer, Ypres, Ghent, and Breda, and also the very memorable release of 1,728 women soldiers of the AK, the Polish Home Army, from the camp at Oberlangen. He unfortunately had to give up his music studies. He was offered a scholarship, but he could never take up his music studies. He was also a composer. He played the violin, he played the piano, accordion, but life, he had to look after his family, so he never completed his music studies. And hopefully I can carry on some of our family tradition. Again, you can look him up online, Jerzy Żegota Januszaitis. So thank you very much for listening, and I wish you all the best and many, many happy memories. Thank you. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thanks, Ivana.
Na zdrowie, że nie ma tutaj wódki.
We'll ask you to come back. We'll ask you to come back in a few minutes. Ivana, we'll ask you to come back in 20 minutes.
I drodzy Państwo, obiecany film Artyści
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the promised movie, Artist of Artists. It's not because of my books, but it will put a frame, a historical frame to everything that took place in this hall. Thank you.
Znajdujemy się w Galerii Polskiej Sztuki Współczesnej. Zobaczymy tu niezwykłą, pierwszą taką wystawę w Polsce. Zobaczymy na niej dzieła wybitnych, uznanych w świecie polskich malarzy. To wręcz niewiarygodne, że niektóre z tych prac czekały na ten moment ponad 75 lat. O co tu chodzi?
What is this about?
Dlaczego ściany w tej galerii są
Why
puste?
are the walls in this gallery
Przecież dawno
empty?
powinny tu wisieć prace artystów, o których
Works
większość
of
z nas
artists
zwyczajnie
of whom most of us have never heard should have been here for years. Why are they only going on these walls today? Well, for the last 80 years, everything was done for the memory of these works to disappear.